Imagine a life where no one, no insult, no indifference, no disrespect could steal your inner peace. You still hear the criticism, you still witness the chaos, but your mind no longer gets carried away by it. That might sound distant, but it's far from impossible. The issue is that most of us live in a reactive state. A careless word, a dismissive glance, an unanswered message. Any one of these can throw off our entire emotional balance for the day. We don't truly command our own minds. We let emotions run the show, but that can change. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to be cold or unfeeling. It helps you become strong, steady, and unshaken by the world's turmoil. In today's video, you'll uncover profound practical tools to reclaim your emotional sovereignty and live with a calmness no one can take from you. 1. Lower your expectations. Tear up the invisible. Fairness contract. We often get angry, not because something terrible has happened, but because it didn't align with the expectation in our mind. A friend didn't thank us after we helped them. A co-worker failed to acknowledge our effort. A loved one said something hurtful, even though we've always treated them well. Deep down, we're not angry at the act itself. We're angry because we believe it was unfair. We think that if we did the right thing, others should respond in kind. But this is the silent trap of expectation, an invisible contract we wrote in our head and then expect the world to follow. This doesn't mean you're wrong to hope for kindness or fairness, but be honest, the world never signed that contract with you. No one actually promised to treat you the way you expect, and when they don't, you feel betrayed, disappointed, even deeply hurt. But in truth, you weren't betrayed by others. You were betrayed by your own expectations. This is something the Stoics saw clearly thousands of years ago. They understood that most negative emotions don't come from reality itself, but from the gap between reality and expectation. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that he would encounter arrogant, deceitful, and ungrateful people. Not because he was pessimistic, but because he wanted his mind to be unshaken when it happened. By accepting that the world would not follow his script, he remained calm. That was his way of tearing up the invisible fairness contract, of letting go of the idea that if he did good, good must be returned. The Stoics continued to live virtuously, but without expecting a reward. They acted from their own virtue, not for recognition. Think about it. If you help someone and they don't thank you, how do you react? If you feel angry, it's likely because you subconsciously thought, I helped you, so you should thank me. But what if you acted from the mindset, I helped you because it was right, and how you respond is your business? Suddenly, you're free from the sting of ingratitude, and you retain the inner calm that is your greatest strength. When you tear up the contract of expectation, everything in life becomes a gift, not an obligation. A compliment becomes a joy, not a debt paid on time. A kind gesture becomes a warm surprise, not something you were entitled to. And when everything becomes a gift, you live in gratitude instead of demand, in freedom instead of frustration. This is the foundation of a peace no one can take from you, a mind no longer shaken by others' ingratitude, because you no longer expect them to repay anything at all. 2. Pause and observe. The soul mirroring technique. Have you ever reacted too quickly to a hurtful comment, only to regret what you said afterward? Have you ever felt anger rising before you even realized you were angry? That's because you acted before understanding what was driving you. The emotion appeared and you reacted like a reflex, instinctive, automatic, and often leading to consequences you'd later have to carry. The Stoics didn't let that happen. They practiced a simple but powerful technique. Pause and reflect, a method we might call the soul mirroring technique. The essence of this practice is to pause for 3 seconds, just 3 seconds, before reacting to anything that triggers an emotional response. Those 3 seconds aren't to plot a comeback or suppress the other person. They are to turn inward and ask a vital question. What wound in me is trying to speak right now? If you truly listen, you'll see that your anger isn't just about someone being rude. It's rooted in a fear of being disrespected. The pain isn't just from not being heard today, it's from being overlooked many times before. The frustration isn't just about the moment, it's about a surge of old memories rising up. The soul mirroring technique isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about seeing it clearly. When you pause, observe, and name your anger, you're no longer its victim. You become the observer, the master. The key is understanding that emotion itself isn't the enemy. It's the unconscious reaction to it that causes harm. Someone says something offensive, and instead of snapping back, you pause and ask, "Why does this bother me so much?" Maybe it's because you hold a belief that needs to be re-examined. The belief that you must always be respected, or that everyone should understand you. When you see that, you've taken a major step toward emotional liberation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We are disturbed not by what happens, but by how we think about it." The soul mirroring technique helps you see yourself before you react to the world. You no longer speak from unhealed wounds. You choose to speak from understanding. You're no longer pulled by immediate emotion. You learn to stand within the storm and stay anchored. And that calmness, silent yet sharp, is what makes you unshakable by anyone or anything. 3. Substitutional meditation. Seeing the storm, not just the rain. There's a reason we so easily grow angry or respond negatively to others. We only see the surface. We see a rude co-worker, a stranger with no manners, a family member lashing out for no reason, and we immediately judge them as mean, selfish, or disrespectful. But the Stoics teach us a radically different way of seeing. They call it substitutional meditation, a practice of imaginative perspective that dissolves anger through empathy. At its core, substitutional meditation means replacing the role in your mind. When someone offends you, instead of picturing them as blameworthy, imagine them as a child angry from abandonment, an old person panicking from loss of control, or someone sick, desperate, and unable to express their pain. When you view them through the lens of suffering, you no longer react as if you're being attacked. You see the pain behind the behavior, and you no longer get pulled into a meaningless battle. Imagine a friend speaking harsh, critical, even aggressive words. The usual reaction is to defend yourself, push back, or walk away. But if you pause and mentally replace that image with someone crying from disappointment, betrayal, or a lifetime of not knowing how to love well, you'll realize they don't need an argument. They need your composure to keep things from getting worse. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the people he met could be rude, selfish, jealous, or foolish. But he must not forget that they act this way not from malice, but from ignorance of better ways. And if he believed that only perfect people deserved kindness, he would have abandoned his own virtue. That is substitutional meditation, a training of the mind to see the storm within others, not just the rain hitting your face. When you practice this daily, you begin to see people don't intend to hurt you. They're trapped in their own unhealed pain. They don't react because you're wrong, but because they don't know how to manage themselves. And when you understand that, you no longer need to retaliate. You no longer feel offended. You feel something far more precious. Compassion, not just for them, but for yourself, for choosing to protect your peace rather than hand it over to meaningless rage. 4. Burn the identity contract. There are moments when we get angry, not because what someone said is untrue, but because it threatens the image we're trying to protect. Someone questions your ability, and you feel offended because you see yourself as competent. Someone calls you selfish, and you explode, not because they're right, but because you believe you're caring. This is the identity contract, an invisible agreement you signed with yourself about who you must be and how others must see you. But the problem is, the world doesn't know that contract exists, and when someone acts in ways that contradict your self-image, you feel insulted, hurt, angry. This is a subtle trap. You might think you're simply reacting to disrespect, but really, you're defending a familiar role. The Stoics saw that anger often doesn't come from circumstances, but from a threatened ego. Epictetus taught, you cannot be offended unless you agree to be. This means, unless you have a fragile self-image to defend, no one can truly disturb your inner calm. But when you tie yourself to an identity, like the smart one, the kind one, or the one who never fails, you walk straight into an emotional trap. The moment someone denies or challenges that identity, you react as if your entire being is under attack. Burning the identity contract doesn't mean abandoning your values or character. It means you stop believing those labels are required for dignity. You can still be skilled, kind, resilient, but you don't need others to confirm that for you to feel whole. When you no longer grip your identity tightly, you become more flexible, more at ease, and harder to wound. You act not to protect your image, but to live true to the deeper values within. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself he was not an emperor, not a great man, but a temporary soul moving through the universe. When you burn the identity contract, you do the same. You return to your essence. No roles, no defense, no need to prove. And when there's nothing left to protect, there's nothing left to harm. You are free, you are at peace, and no one can take that from you. 5. Stop reacting from wounds. Respond from understanding. There's a truth few are willing to admit. Most of our reactions don't come from reason, but from unhealed wounds. A careless remark makes you angry, not because it was offensive, but because it touched an old memory where you were belittled. A cold gesture makes you feel hurt, not because the other person was wrong, but because you once felt abandoned. These wounds, silently formed in the past, are triggered again and again, and each time they cause you to react, not to the present moment, but to unresolved pain. The Stoics understood that freedom doesn't come from avoiding wounds, but from ending our reactivity to them. Reactions from wounds are unconscious, quick, intense, and often regrettable. It's like someone brushing against an old scar, and you strike back before even knowing who touched you. When you live like that, you turn the whole world into a threat, and you remain imprisoned in your past. To break that chain of reaction, you must practice the pause. Not suppression, but observation. When emotion rises, ask yourself a simple yet powerful question. Am I reacting to the present or to memory? This question turns you inward. It helps you realize that your anger isn't just about the person in front of you. It's a reflex from a deeper fear. The fear of not being loved, of being judged, of not being enough. When you identify the root, you'll see you have another choice. Instead of reacting from pain, you can respond from understanding. You can choose silence over shouting, listening over defending, observing over judging. And in that choice, you reclaim your freedom. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our view of them." That becomes possible only when you stop acting from old reflexes and begin responding with new awareness. Stoics weren't people without feelings. They felt deeply, but they didn't let emotion dictate action. They could clearly distinguish between an old wound trying to speak and a present situation needing attention. From that clarity, they chose to act, not to soothe the ego, but to preserve balance of mind. When you learn this, you not only react less, but live more deeply. You're no longer led by wounds, but guided by wisdom, and that is the foundation of true peace. 6. Become the observer of the universe. When something makes you angry, a rude comment, a disrespectful act, or a personal conflict, most of us get pulled in as if that moment is all that exists. The mind contracts, inflates the issue, and everything else fades away. In that moment, the ego feels threatened, and you react to defend it. But Stoics don't see life through such a narrow lens. They practice a unique technique, becoming the observer of the universe, expanding their perspective until every minor irritation becomes incredibly small. Picture yourself sitting in a room during a heated argument. Voices rise, words clash, emotions flare. Now imagine yourself slowly rising above the room, looking down from the rooftop, then from the clouds, then from Earth's orbit. From there, you can no longer hear the yelling or see the faces clearly. Everything shrinks. The conflict that felt enormous just moments ago now appears as a speck among millions of unfolding events. Then you see the entire planet, a pale blue dot drifting in a vast cosmos where humans are born, argue, love, and die, all in the blink of cosmic time. This isn't abstract imagination, it's a practical tool for softening the ego. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, often reminded himself to return to that perspective. He wrote, "Look again at the universe and see how trivial and fleeting are the things that trouble you. When you do this, you detach from the storm of the moment and face it instead with reason and compassion. You stop reacting as if the world is ending because someone disrespected you. You no longer feel threatened by petty conflict. You see that whatever's happening, however unpleasant, is just a small part of your life's journey, and it too will pass." The observer of the universe isn't cold or detached. They're fully present and engaged, but with a calm born of wide vision. They don't exaggerate problems or identify with every minor clash, and in doing so, they preserve inner freedom. A freedom not gained by controlling others, but by seeing clearly where they stand in something far greater. When you become the observer of the universe, you don't just grow calmer, you grow wiser. Because you've learned to discern what truly deserves your mind and what should simply drift away with the wind. 7. Exercise for the soul. Turning conflict into strength training. We often try to avoid unpleasant situations, an insult, a disrespectful act, being ignored by others. All of it makes us want to retreat or react on instinct. But to the Stoics, every discomfort is an opportunity, not to prove anything to others, but to train the inner self. They called it exercise for the soul, a workout not for the body, but for the spirit. Imagine yourself in a gym. If you only lift light weights, avoiding strain and sweat, your body will never grow stronger. Likewise, if you live only in comfort, never challenged by rudeness, ingratitude, or injustice, you'll never develop resilience, patience, or strength of character. Stoics don't seek comfort, they seek growth. And they know that every difficult moment is a repetition for the soul. When someone says something hurtful, you have two choices: react instantly, or take it as a chance to test your self-control. When you're misunderstood, you can get angry, or choose calm and observation. Each of these moments becomes training for your inner strength, a strength that is quiet, not boastful, but enduring. Like muscles that grow in silence, spiritual strength is built through moments when you choose not to react unconsciously. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Treat each difficulty as a chance to practice virtue. Someone insults you, it's a chance to practice calm. Someone ignores you, it's a test of self-worth. A harsh comment, it's a workout in resilience." By treating life as a training ground for the soul, you turn each clash into an advantage. You no longer fear the negative because you've learned to use it to become stronger. When you adopt this mindset, your life changes. You no longer wish for ease, but for the strength to face whatever comes. You're no longer afraid of conflict. You know how to turn it into a lesson. And over time, you'll see no one can bring you down if you treat every tough situation as an exercise in self-mastery. This is not just Stoic practice, it is the way of one who is truly mature. 8. Not everyone who offends you is evil. Name the demon, not the person. There's a common tendency in the human mind. When hurt by someone, we quickly label them as bad, rude, awful, immoral. They become the enemy. We don't just react to their behavior, we condemn their entire being as if a single mistake or insult defines who they are. But the Stoics saw it differently. They didn't name the person, they named the demon. That means instead of tying the wrongdoing to someone's core identity, they separated the behavior and focused on the underlying cause. When someone offends you, they might be acting out of anger, envy, jealousy, or fear. Those aren't who they are the demons in their mind that have taken control. If you understand this, you'll feel much lighter. Because instead of seeing them as the enemy, you recognize them as someone overtaken by forces they can't yet master. Like someone sick, they act unconsciously, not necessarily to hurt you, but because they don't yet know how to act differently in their current state. Marcus Aurelius once advised, "When someone behaves badly, remember, they don't really know what they're doing." This isn't an excuse for wrong behavior, but a way to free yourself from anger. When you see the anger in another as a separate force, not as their identity, you can keep your compassion without getting hurt. You don't have to stay connected to them, but you also don't need to carry resentment because you no longer see them as evil, just as a lost mind. Instead of thinking, he's a terrible person, you can think, the anger in him has taken over. Instead of saying, she's mean, you might say, the fear in her is speaking. When you change the name, you change the lens and your emotional response. This doesn't just reduce your pain, it sharpens your clarity, which the Stoics always held as supreme. Tranquility doesn't come from controlling others, but from controlling how you perceive them. And when you choose to see the demon instead of condemning the person, you preserve your kindness without losing your reason. That is true strength. Gentle, not weak. Understanding, not vulnerable. 9. The final 10-minute challenge. The last breath frame technique. There's a simple yet incredibly effective practice for managing emotions, especially strong ones like anger, hurt, or disappointment. Imagine you only have 10 minutes left to live. This method is called the last breath frame, a mental exercise that brings you back to what truly matters, dissolves impulsive reactions, and restores clarity in your mind. The Stoics have long used death not as a source of pessimism, but as a tool for intentional living. And only by confronting the final edge of life do we truly realize what's worthy of our limited time and attention. Imagine this. You're in the middle of an argument. Someone insults you, makes you angry. Before reacting, you pause and ask yourself, if I had only 10 minutes left to live, would I want to spend it being angry at this person? Would I want my final words to be a hurtful retort? When you place the moment within that limited time frame, the anger suddenly shrinks. What seemed important just seconds ago, who's right, who's wrong, who wins, who loses, suddenly feels petty. Because at the end of life, it's not anger, but peace that we long to hold on to. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Act, think, and speak as though it were the last thing you do in life." This is not meant to create pressure, but to bring us back to the present, with the clear awareness that time is finite and we should use it wisely. When you practice the last breath frame, you no longer act on impulse. You choose your words, your actions, and even your silence with intention. Because you understand, if time is the most precious gift, then every moment spent in anger is a piece of life you'll never get back. This technique is especially powerful when you're caught in intense emotion. Instead of trying to reason or suppress it, simply place yourself in the mindset of someone about to leave this world. You'll find yourself letting go, not because you force it, but because you see clearly what is worth keeping. Peace in that moment doesn't come from winning the argument, but from not letting pettiness cloud your mind before you go. It creates a powerful pause, where you stop reacting blindly and begin living with the awareness of what truly matters. And when you practice this daily, you're not just preparing for your final moment, you're living a focused life. A life where every word is a choice, every action is deliberate, and every second is an expression of deep understanding of life's true value. That is the pinnacle of self-mastery and the foundation of unshakable peace. 10. Sacred discipline. The power of the pause. We live in a world overflowing with stimulation, constant phone notifications, words we don't like, overwhelming tasks, emotions stirred by the hour. In such an environment, reaction becomes instinct. An insult is met with an immediate comeback. a sign of disrespect is returned with anger. A misunderstanding instantly turns into conflict, but in the midst of these reflexes, the Stoic chooses something else: silence. They see the pause before reaction not as weakness, but as a sacred discipline where reason is allowed to lead instead of emotion. Epictetus once said, "No one can hurt you unless you allow it." And that permission begins the moment you speak, lash out, or let emotion guide your actions. But if you pause, even for a single breath, you've already broken the automatic chain. You create a small space between stimulus and response, a space where you can choose the best reaction instead of the weakest reflex. That space is the shelter of reason, and it is in that space where true freedom begins to form. You may feel offended, but you don't have to respond. You may feel misunderstood, but you don't need to defend yourself immediately. The pause allows you to see the moment clearly. Where is this emotion coming from? Is it worth disturbing my peace? Does it reflect truth, or just my ego's exaggeration? When you pause and ask those questions, you step out of reaction and into control. The pause is not passivity. It is the most active thing you can do in a world that constantly pushes you to react. It is a declaration: I govern my mind. I will not let anyone or anything dictate my attitude. And if you develop that ability, the power to stay silent when your mind is boiling, you're building a kind of strength no one can take away. Not a strength to dominate others, but a strength to remain untouched by their control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Silence can be a form of dignity." In many situations, words do not clarify, they only complicate. But the right silence can calm conflict, preserve dignity, and guard your inner clarity. That's when you stop being pulled by ego, no longer needing to prove anything, no longer living to react to the world, but living to preserve your inner stability. That sacred discipline, the power of a small pause, can completely transform how you face life's tensions. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you're training your mind to become steadier, stronger, and freer. It's the sign of a powerful soul. Not because it never gets angry, but because it knows when to speak and when to protect the peace that belongs only to itself. I used to be someone easily driven by emotion. A cold glance, a tactless comment, or a subtle act of dismissal could consume my thoughts for hours, even an entire day. I lived in a reactive state, constantly trying to control others to protect my feelings, without realizing that the only thing I truly needed to control was myself. It wasn't until I began exploring Stoic philosophy that everything slowly began to change. I came to see that anger doesn't arise from others, but from expectations, unexamined wounds, and an ego in constant need of protection. I started practicing step by step, pausing before reacting, observing my emotions, asking myself, is this worth losing my peace over? And most of the time, the answer was no. As I changed the way I saw things, I stopped being manipulated by others' emotions or behavior. I chose calm as a deliberate response, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to live freely within my own mind. To me, it's not just a philosophy, it's a way of life. If these reflections help you understand yourself better and offer a new way of living, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content. And remember, peace doesn't come from bending the world to your will, but from not allowing the world to shake you. That is the quiet yet enduring strength you can build for life. See you in the next video.